been southbound, I've been hellbound, riding on the midnight train. Going too fast now, think I'll slow down, standing in the pouring rain.
And we're back with another episode of the One Hell of a Life Outdoor Podcast. This is Tristan and Tony Vogel, and today we have Josh Osburn, and he is the Waterfowl Ecologist for Forbes Biological Station. And many of you in the waterfowl community, at least if you're in the Mississippi Flyway, probably have heard of them or seen their posts on Facebook. They're one of the key things that we look at all season long because we're hunting in Northeast Arkansas, so we're curious, like, hey, what are these guys seeing along the Illinois, Missouri, Mississippi rivers?
What's going on north of us?
Right, exactly. It really paints a picture to what we might expect to see for waterfowl. So, Josh, thank you so much for taking the time to come on tonight, man, and we're excited to learn about what you guys do and just talk some waterfowl.
Absolutely. Thanks, guys. I appreciate you having me.
Yes, sir. Absolutely.
Yeah, Josh. So people that aren't familiar with like Forbes, kind of go into what you guys do, what you do specifically for sure, but what the mission, the goal, and feel free to even talk about how you guys are funded. I'm not sure about that, but yeah, just kind of go into that if you wouldn't mind.
Sure. So I work for the Forbes Biological Station, which Tristan mentioned. We're kind of a research arm. I guess you could look at us as a research arm of the University of Illinois. So technically, we're a part of the Illinois Natural History Survey, and that is a department within the Prairie Research Institute, which is a research institute housed within the University of Illinois. So that's a lot of different things going on there, but that's who we are. The Forbes Biological Station has been around since the late 1800s. We actually just celebrated our 130th anniversary last year. We're the oldest inland field research station in North America. So we've been around for quite some time. The waterfowl program has, I guess I should state early on, that program was largely kind of cataloging everything on the river. So the mussel population, the invertebrate communities and fisheries communities. And it wasn't until the 20s and 30s that we began to establish a waterfowl research program. And so that's kind of when we got our beginnings there. Some of the heavier names and more important names in waterfowl research and management kind of walked through our doors and cut their teeth there. And of course, some of them stayed on and led the program. But we've been around for quite some time. Our research is largely funded through the Illinois DNR. So the cool survey that I get to post about every week in the fall and the spring, that's funded directly by the Illinois Department of Natural Resources. And it's the oldest aerial survey of its type. We've been doing that survey since 1948 from the air. There was a few years in there where when Frank Belrose, who actually started it, there was a few years there starting in the late 30s that he actually surveyed from the ground. But in 48, he started the actual aerial inventory that we continue today. So we do a lot of other things. We've got multiple research projects going on at any one time. We've kind of, over the last, I would say, 15 years, kind of dipped our toes into the shorebird and now the secretive marsh bird world. So we're doing some rail research and some secretive marsh bird research as well. But we still try to keep a heavy component of waterfowl work in there.
Wow, man. I mean, as you're talking, I can just think about, the years that professionals, that are way above what we understand, that set these, limits for certain ducks, how important the estimations are on, what they see north, what comes down here, all that. I just think about how vital you guys' research has been to that.
Yeah, so it's a pretty important piece of the puzzle for sure. We're by no means even close to the only piece of that puzzle.
Sure.
But part of the reason that this whole thing started was, or at least the aerial survey anyway, is because we wanted to get an idea of when the peaks and valleys were, when the birds were here during the fall. And DNR kind of rolled that into a measure that they can use to help set hunting seasons within the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Framework. But so they can set hunting seasons to provide the most opportunity for their hunt. I'm not sure what that was, but provide the most opportunities for harvest for their hunters while the most birds were here. And so we're kind of a long state latitudinally.
Yep.
And so that means we have multiple zones, and we're kind of in a unique place there. And so you have to know when the peak is in different places within the state.
Sure. Now, what area do you guys cover north to south? And I guess east to west, I guess. I mean, I guess it's just along the river, but what's your area of coverage?
So I will say that our survey isn't the only aerial survey in the state. DNR does some surveys of their own.
Mm-hmm.
But we cover the area from up around the Quad Cities area on the Mississippi River,
mm-hmm.
all the way down to St. Charles County, so at the confluence of the Illinois and Mississippi, and then back up all the way, pretty much all the way up to Lakin, Illinois, Spring Bay, Illinois area. So we cover pretty much all of the Mississippi River as it occurs in Illinois, and then we cover most of the Illinois River. Yeah, in the state.
Wow. No, I mean, you guys, just over the years, you guys have probably seen some pretty incredible stuff and have a lot, especially with your eyes, what you've seen from there. And, and one of the ones that hits me recently was the picture you had of the coots that were keeping an ice hole open last year or the year before. And it was just circled with blood. And I was like, what in the heck? And the bald eagles, I guess, were just picking them off, huh?
Yeah, that's been a few years ago now, yeah. I think. But that was up at Port Louisa, which is a refuge that we survey, kind of the most northern refuge that we survey during the fall. And it was just a bad day to be a coot. That's probably my favorite picture that I've taken from the airplane, because it just looked like a massacre down there.
And, I mean, to be that high in there and just see that blood ring, I was like, that's no jelly donut. That thing was, they were rocking them pretty good. And I was just talking to somebody the other day in Arkansas about, actually not somebody, I was talking to our friend's grandfather, and he had talked to us one time about, he said, have you guys been seeing any eagles at the beginning of the season? And we're like, no. And he goes, that's probably not going to be that good of hunting then, and he was talking about how the bald eagles follow the flock, and if you're from Illinois and anywhere along that river, in Missouri, anybody along that stretch of Illinois, that one of the coolest things about the winter is you get to go down there and just see the masses of bald eagles. That come down, and I guess really that's what they're doing, huh? They're just following the waterfowl migration.
Yeah, I mean, they're migratory, of course, themselves, but you gotta wonder how much of that is just following the food source in a lot of ways. So
nomadic.
Yeah.
Yeah, but that's we haven't had it the last few years, but luckily we got it this year. The last survey. So currently, our last survey of the year is the Flyway calls the midwinter inventory, and it's the first week in January, where every state surveys during that period to try to get a snapshot of the migration, all at once, right? And so that's our last survey of the year currently, and that typically where everything is frozen up, even the river. The last few years it hasn't been that way, but this year it was. And so, especially in that Pool 19 area, so around Montrose, Iowa, and Fort Hamilton and those places, the eagles just kind of are standing out on the ice, like in the river. It's pretty cool. I think I had something in the neighborhood of like 300 eagles out there over just one little small stretch. Yeah.
I'm curious, Josh, how do you guys, when you're up there in the air, just ballpark estimating of the numbers you're seeing? Is there do you kind of grid it and like there's a certain amount here, and then you kind of learn to be like, okay, that's 500 ducks, and then I can tell what 5,000 ducks is because I know what 500 ducks is. Like, how does that work?
Yeah. So yeah, kind of both of those things. So I'll say that it's not a perfect number. It's never going to be like there's 1,028 birds sitting on this on this refuge, and if you look at the surveyed numbers, it's usually in terms of 5s or 10s. And so that's what we're doing is in those larger flocks, we're just getting an idea of what 10, 20, 30, 100, 200, 500, 1,000 looks like. And then we're kind of extrapolating over that specific flock. And I do make that distinction because each flock kind of groups themselves differently, especially throughout the year. As things freeze up, they get tighter, and as food sources are flooded initially, they get super tight and kind of what my pilot calls black stacking, where they just kind of pile on top of each other.
Yeah.
But yeah, so we get that's exactly right. We get kind of an estimation of what 100 or 500 or 1,000 looks like, and then just kind of estimate from there. We did a study a number of years ago to try to get at how accurate we were of estimating, and it's in the 93-95% range.
That's pretty good.
Yeah.
It's not bad, but when you're talking about 100,000 birds, 5% can be a lot, right?
Right.
So it's you can miss a couple thousand birds and still be okay.
Sure.
Right.
Sure. Now, I'm always like thinking about technology and stuff. So is there anything that you guys are looking at, or you've seen anything that as you're in the air, that any tools that help you get a more accurate look at that? Is there anything? I mean, I don't want to overstep boundaries because I think there's something to be said about, obviously if you're up there doing this for years and years and years and years and years and years and years, right? And flights and flights and flights, you've got a pretty doggone good eyeball for doing this compared to if I got up there and looked at it, I'd be like, man, there's 10,000 there. And Josh turns at me and he goes, Tony, that's 500 ducks. you know what I mean? So, is there any technology out there that you guys see that might help benefit in that?
Yeah, you can go ahead and say drones if you want to. That's all right.
Yeah. Well, we don't want you guys to get replaced by drones because there's something I think that's very important about that physical aspect.
Yeah, but we also want to, get the best bang for our conservation dollar, right? So if that's the answer, then that's what it needs to be. But currently, that's just doesn't seem to be the answer. There are multiple projects. We're not involved in this research, but there are multiple projects right now looking at the efficacy of using drones. They have the same problems that a regular observer would have, almost more compounded because they can't move around and kind of focus like a human observer can. But they have the same problems with environmental factors like trees or bushes or corn or vegetation or whatever. They're also impacted by cloud cover and those types of things. But the thing that keeps me confident in my job security is that the technology available to the public is just not there to do this type of survey, right? So we fly 214 miles along the Illinois River and 212 along the Mississippi, and we do it in a day.
Wow.
And
Wow.
the current technology, so all we're paying is for a pilot, the plane, and the fuel, and my time.
Right.
And the current technology for a drone just isn't there yet.
Sure.
And so what that would turn into is buying a whole pile of drones,
Right.
and getting a whole pile of area biologists and refuge managers qualified to operate those drones. And oh, by the way, on federal refuges, you're not permitted.
Duck hunters, y'all need to check out Williamson Outfitters down on the Florida Panhandle this season. They offer some of the best coastal duck hunting and inshore fishing east of the Mississippi, targeting species like redheads, bluebills, buffleheads, and canvasbacks, just to name a few. From the cast and blast packages for those who love to fish and hunt, to adrenaline-pumping layout boat hunts that get you up close and personal, Williamson Outfitters has it all. And when the day's done, unwind in comfort at one of the 2 amazing lodges designed to make you feel right at home after a successful day out on the water. Mention the One Hell of a Life podcast when booking and get 10% off your booking. Spots are filling up fast, so call or text Captain Chris today at 850-251-8650 or visit www.floridaducks.com.
To operate drones over. And so there's just a litany of barriers to there. But the biggest one that keeps me confident in being able to do this for at least a little while longer is that the technology is just not available to the public.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure. Now, I don't know if you've been asked this question before, but and this doesn't seem so waterfowl related, but more like what it takes to really do what you guys do. Talk about I don't know how comfortable I am getting up in a Cessna all the time. It's a little bit of a dangerous job what you do there, and I always watch these guys like on Mountain Men or whatever, and he's like, they're doing the check over their plane and getting everything right and making sure that, and I'm like, yep. And then that one time, know what I mean? Like,
right.
like what was it? Tristan drove over a deer bone and it went into the sidewall of his tire. I'm like, that's never happened in my life.
Right.
Yeah.
That you go past a deer carcass on the road and
a bone shard gets
it's like the deer are telling you to quit hunting for the
Is
season.
that instant karma? Yeah.
Yeah, but
Right.
but I'm just saying it's a little bit dangerous what you guys do there.
It is. So it's inherently dangerous. There was a paper a number of years back, probably 15, 20 years ago, that talked about, because we don't just conduct aerial surveys of ducks. There's aerial surveys of white-tailed deer, aerial surveys of elk and moose. There's aerial surveys of all these critters, right?
Mm-hmm.
But within our field, within the wildlife field, aerial surveys was the most dangerous kind of job. But we have a very experienced pilot. He knows the plane inside and out. Mike Cruz from Cruz Aviation out of Pekin. He's actually been flying the survey longer than I have. So he
And how many years is that?
So Mike's been flying the survey. I think we decided. I think we said 17 years that he's been flying up around. Mike's very, very, very good at what he does. He's a crop duster by trade. Like, he owns a crop dusting business, so he knows how to get in and out of hairy situations really quickly. And we fly these surveys in a low wing aircraft. So it's a Piper Arrow, Piper Cherokee Arrow, and it's a really small, really swift kind of really maneuverable plane. And so there's not a whole lot of people that I would trust to fly me into big flocks of birds, and Mike is by far on the top of that list.
That's so cool, man. That's so cool. So I guess with that said, has there ever been any sketchy situations that you've encountered when being on board?
Yeah, I mean, we usually do a really good job because like you were kind of alluding to before, it only takes one mistake in the air, right, to have a really, really, really bad day.
Sure.
So we try to stay aware. We do a really good job of keeping ourselves out of bad situations, but the occasion does arise where, just by sheer circumstance, you find yourself in the middle of 800,000 snow geese and you can't get out. So that happened about 3 springs ago. We had just an incredible migration of snow geese through here in the spring, which, oh, by the way, we do these surveys in the spring too. And we didn't notice, so this was on a nature conservancy owned property here locally, and we didn't notice that birds were coming off of a cooling lake and like coming into the refuge. And so we were trying to get down there to count these huge masses of birds that were already down there. And then when we got turned around to try to get up out of there, the birds were also coming in on top of us. And so it was this kind of this super dance. Snow geese and speckled bellies are really, really flighty. So they commonly jump before we ever really get there. And so they tend to try to stay away from the plane anyway. And so we kind of worked ourselves out of it, but that's probably, and that was just really bad luck on our part. But Mike, being the consummate professional he is, he got us out of there in a hurry.
Shout out to Mike.
Yeah, shout out to Mike.
No, that's awesome. I know you were kind of talking about the spring survey, and I think I saw you guys post. You start that in February.
Yeah, so it's almost always starts in February. It just depends on ice coverage and when the migration starts, really. So it doesn't really make a whole lot of sense for us to get out there if the birds aren't out there yet.
Right.
But when it happens quick in the spring. So we try to stay on top of it, and I'm constantly calling around to ask if people are seeing birds yet. And we keep a close watch on the lock and dam system to see what kind of ice they're seeing at the dams. And so it's usually around that week of Valentine's Day, actually, oddly enough. But we kind of count. I think can range anywhere from 6 to 8 weeks, and then we're done with the spring flight. So spring migration goes really quick through this neck of the woods.
Now, this year, because we've been talking about, just since we've been duck hunting in the last 7-8 years, this seems like the strongest. We've had winters where it's like, okay, you get the temperature, but you don't get the snow coverage, or you get the snow coverage and you don't get the temps or whatever.
Right.
But it seems like this year, kind of just, at least in the Mississippi flyway, and all the states above that, is the first time where both of those things fully came together at the right time.
In such a large area.
Yeah. And it seems like, it just seems like this was the best opportunity we were going to have in a long time, as duck hunters, to get some, migratory birds midway through the season. That may have hung up a state or two above us. And I'm just curious to see if what you guys were surveying kind of reflected that. I know you guys not too long ago just ended your surveys for the winter, but I'm just curious.
Yeah, I think your last flight was the 7th or something.
Yeah, last flight was on the 7th. So we kind of caught it right as we flew on the 3rd and then again on the 7th. Actually on the 2nd and then again on the 7th. So we got a pretty good picture of like the birds that were still hanging around here, which wasn't a whole lot. And then we got a really cool picture of, okay, after the snow, after things really started freezing, what was hanging on. And it was one of our lowest counts in several years, actually, that last flight. So it was, yeah. And, you mentioned that weather thing. I would, anybody that's interested in kind of seeing how that plays out, or like hearing some people talk about it, Dr. Mike Schumer, who we've collaborated with before, and Mike Brazier from Ducks Unlimited.
Yes.
They did a really cool live stream a few days ago, it's probably over a week ago now, kind of on the front end of that. So trying to predict what was going to happen. And they had a couple of meteorologists. I'm going to forget their names, Chance and Scott, who are both hunters from Missouri and Arkansas, I think, respectively. But they kind of predicted, looking at the forecast of the weather ahead, what should happen using some of Mike's research that he's been doing the past decade. And it was a really cool kind of, let's see if this weather severity index can predict what we're about to see. But yeah, anybody interested in that should go on YouTube and look for that, because it was a pretty cool kind of crash course in meteorology and how ducks respond to severe weather.
Yeah, no, I'll have to check that out.
Was that the Ducks Unlimited podcast?
Yeah, so I don't know if they put it out on their podcast. I know it's on YouTube.
Okay,
I'm assuming they put it out whatever platform they use for their podcast.
Sure. No, that'd be interesting to see for sure. Yeah, I mean, we don't want to make this podcast anything about us really tonight, but what we saw as a result of that was pretty epic.
Good.
It really was in Northeast Arkansas. Our buddy runs Delta Thunder Outfitters there outside of Jonesboro, and as a duck hunter, you're dreaming about these days. You're hoping for these days. You've been humbled by days like this where it didn't happen. Where everybody said everything was going to be right and it wasn't, but it definitely was, and there had to be a good push of birds that came down through from all that weather.
Yeah,
I think
it's cool to get a win every once in a while, right?
Yep, for sure.
Especially as a duck hunter, yeah. I mean, I think though, I don't think it's the most birds we've seen in that area though. I mean, I think there's a lot of new birds that moved in, but I feel like we've seen a lot of birds at different times there. So I'd be curious to know. I mean, it's hard to say without running a survey right there, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I'd be curious to know. I mean,
there's something to be said about the facts, right? So if stuff is frozen above you, the ducks go somewhere. I just saw something with Cohen. He said this duck, it just took off from Tennessee, went all the way to South Louisiana.
Wow.
And he just straight path all the way down.
I'm gone.
So was that just because that's what it wanted to do, or was it because, hey, I'm a little bit more less weather tolerant than my buddies, and I'm out of here. I mean, or my fat reserves are low, or who knows?
Sure.
What makes them do what they do? I always think about the flip side of migration, where everybody talks about the Halloween push. Is always the big first push of migration, but we talk to friends that are up north, Michigan, places where it gets really cold. And, oh man, we're still packed with mallards. And I'm sitting here thinking, we're down here and wherever we're hunting, a lot of times in Arkansas going, oh man, we're going to get another push. While there's, I don't know how many hundreds of thousands, of mallards. I'm just talking about that species specific, because I know they're all a little bit different with the weather, that they're a little bit more tolerant. You know what I mean? So, just like Brad Cohen said one time, I think the last podcast we had him on, it doesn't take that many birds for a hunter to sit in a blind and feel like they had the best day of their life.
Right.
I mean,
Right.
you may,
and by that same token, it doesn't take, that many birds for somebody sitting in, like a warm water creek up north, and to be able to say, hey, we're still loaded with mallards up here, right? So,
Right.
as everything freezes up, those birds kind of concentrate. They tend to concentrate to the open waters and where they can find food, like in the ag fields around it, if they're not snow covered. And so you see that a lot. People worried about when the next push of birds is going to come, or, hey, we're never going to get birds because they're hanging out in Wisconsin or Minnesota or whatever. They're still loaded with mallards. Well, they probably still have a few mallards, but it's probably a low percentage of what they were at the peak. It's maybe 10 to 15%. And that's just a arbitrary number, but a small percentage of what they would see out there. It just looks like they're loaded because they're all congregated into the only open water that they can find. It's the same thing that happens down south in the spring when people start pulling boards on their hunted areas. We lose all this water, and it concentrates all these ducks the first or second week after duck season, and everybody's saying, well, we ought to be hunting right now, because all the birds are here. Well, that's not necessarily the case. It's just the birds have less area to go, and they're not being pressured. I'm sure you guys talked plenty about pressure with Dr. Cohen.
Yeah,
he's doing some super cool stuff down there.
Yeah.
But so perception plays a heavy role into kind of what we think these birds are doing, or at least what gets said on social media that these birds are doing.
Sure. And, it always makes me wonder, is there any research out there that says why a waterfowl of any species, let's just talk ducks, why some of them, like that hole in the ice with the coots, I'm looking at them going, why don't you just fly south? There's a bunch of you. Why don't you? Are those just ones that, are they dumb? Or are they, and I'm not talking about coots specifically. It could have been mallards, whatever. Or does it have to do with just like they don't have the energy to do it or something?
Yeah, it could be both of those things, right?
Yeah.
So for ducks, specifically, they're going to do whatever it takes to survive. Some of them are photo period migrators, where once the days start getting shorter, they start boogieing out. They start heading south. And some of the birds are just bigger and hardy. I'm looking at the mallards, and they can handle that cold weather a little bit better. And so they tend to be some of the last birds that migrate, other than the golden eyes and the common mergansers. Mergansers, which are also huge.
Yeah.
But I have no excuse for those coots. I have no idea what a couple of hundred coots were doing, in northern Illinois / Iowa on, I think that was either late December or early January. It was a late flight, so they very well could just be stupid. I don't know, or they just could be in such poor body condition. They could have been late hatch birds and in such poor body conditions that they couldn't make it down.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure. One of the things that I've thought of it 3 times since we've been talking, I don't want to forget about it, is like, for example, when we were talking about how valuable you guys flying versus say a drone, you guys had that incredible footage of the spoonies working in tandem to feed as a group. Now, to me, seeing that, all right, folks, that was like a game changer. Okay. Like I start thinking dolphins. All right. And I'm like, wait a minute here. And that was one of the most intriguing things I've seen you guys post here lately. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, so there's a word for it. I forget what the word is, but it's that kind of collaborative feeding. So basically shovelers, and there's some other birds that do it also, but shovelers are the easiest to pick out. They tend to do it a lot. Mm-hmm. And so they'll because they're kind of invertebrate, they're not specialists, but they really, really seem to like macro invertebrates and smaller invertebrates too, I guess. But they'll spin around in circles and circles and circles together until they create this vortex, which draws up all these invertebrates, all these bugs from the substrate, the bottom of the wetland. And so that's I guess an evolutionary mechanism that they've developed to be able to increase their efficiency of foraging. I did not take that picture. Mm-hmm. That picture was taken a few years ago by Aaron Yetter, who flew the survey before me. And I just happened, I think I mentioned something about it in the post the week before, because I started seeing it a whole bunch. And then I just, happy accident, happened upon that picture looking for some stuff for a presentation, and it's like, oh, I need to post this because that's exactly what I was talking about. There's a word for it. Gosh, it just escapes me right now what that word is.
It's so neat.
I would put that on the list for every duck hunter out there that goes, no shit. I mean, really? I mean, that's such a cool thing. That made me like, that's one of my, like, I've been thinking about it and thinking about it and thinking about it. Like, this is one of the things I need to do more research about, because I get so like OCD with anything. And so like now I'm like, all right, I want to learn more about this. Are there certain species that do this, and why do they do it? What do they target? And do they do it a little bit different in every part of the United States? Just like you watch these, it's a learned behavior, right? Like you, if you guys have never seen, there's a specific area, I think it's in Florida, where these dolphins, they have learned to go up to the, I think it's not shad. What goes in the, what's this little small fish that's in the channels? Where they run up and they know that they can take them during low tide and flip them up onto the bank, and then they just come in and just smash them. And,
Sure.
But that only happens in the world. At least this Nat Geo film or whatever I'm watching about it says this is the only place this happens in the world. But those specific ones, it's been a passed on feeding avenue or whatever. And so does that happen too? You know what I mean? And so all these times when you're driving and you're wherever you are and you see a giant wad of ducks get up out of this field or whatever, you're like, all this time I thought it's just me trying to find some food by myself. You know what I mean? Where instead this is an organized buffet. You know, so very, very cool stuff.
You know, the biggest comment I got about that picture from hunters, and I hadn't really thought about it until I started hearing people say it, is hunters that say that your decoys can't touch. You know, like I think that kind of blows that right out of the water.
Oh yeah, yeah, and it made me think that I need to put my decoys, like we need a drone while we're setting the decoys, and now we're putting them in a swirly spiral position like I'm in.
Right.
If you want to kill spoonies, this is what you got to do.
You got to put them in.
Hey man, I love shooting spoonies.
Me too.
Oh,
that's the Illinois greenhead.
Oh, we're big spoonie enthusiasts.
Oh yeah, we're big on the spoonies, and we're definitely big on the green wing teal. Yeah, we love those crackheads so much.
Yeah. They're cool little birds.
My dream hunt, honestly, like just one time in my life, I just want to shoot all spoonies. That's it. Like no other duck.
Well, I got to do that. The problem is I got to do that. Tristan wasn't there. And
I want them to be like late season, so they're all plumed out.
Yeah, well, that's not what happened with this. We shot all spoonies one time, and a 6-man, and every single one of them was a hen. All hens. I got them. They're stacked on a John Deere tractor. It was a pretty cool picture, but honestly, we didn't like go through them real close to see if there were some Judies. Yeah, I mean, there might have been some, but the majority of them were hens, and you can just tell by their beak color. You know, they just didn't have like even the ones like when they're in between when there's a real young spoony drake that's trying to put on some plume. It's a pretty ugly duck, man. I mean, that's about as ugly as they get. You know, you're like, dude, what's wrong with this guy? You know. But no, we love the spoonies for sure.
Josh, do you get out and get a chance to go out and do a good amount of hunting yourself?
I try as much as I possibly can.
Sure.
You know, the survey takes a day a week away from that, and then entering the data and then archiving the data in all the places that it goes takes it at least a half a day, sometimes longer than that when we're in peak migration. So there's another day out of my week, and you know, we've got multiple other projects going on at one time that I'm trying to help out with, and trying to keep up with the banding data because I'm on the permit for the or on the hook for our banding permit here at the station. But I do try to get out as much as I possibly can. Luckily, as a researcher, my schedule is pretty flexible, and on the days that are good for flying are typically not days that are good for hunting, at least at this latitude. Mm-hmm. And so I try to get out a few times a week at least.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's one of the things that when you work, it's like a double-edged sword, right? Like when you work doing something that is involved in what you like to do, if you're a waterfowl guide or something like that, then all of a sudden it's like, okay, I'm not hunting very much because I'm working, like there's that trade-off. But what's so from your background standpoint, what got you into just the waterfowl ecology world? Like what's been your journey?
So I didn't start out doing this. I was in the Navy for 6
Cool.
years.
My dad was in the Navy.
And I didn't get to spend a whole lot of time outdoors while I was in. And so when I moved home, I decided that this was something that I wanted to pursue. And I didn't really even know that this sort of job existed. I shadowed a biologist with the Mississippi Department of Wildlife, Fisheries, and Parks, and he kind of showed me some of the stuff that he got to do as part of his job for research or to help add data to research data sets. And so that's kind of when I started figuring out that this was a road for me. And then I volunteered and as much as I could, took some technician jobs working for the state, but also working for Delta Waterfowl up in the prairies. And then I went to grad school to get my master's degree at Tennessee. We studied habitat use and kind of foraging behavior and food habits of black ducks and other dabblers on a couple of refuges in West Tennessee. And then I moved here and took a job here conducting research. And I didn't start out in the plane. Aaron was flying the survey, and typically if you fall into this role as the observer, you stick in it for a while. So last year was our 75th year of surveys, and I'm the 5th observer.
Wow.
Right. We had another project where we were evaluating disturbance of the plane and trying to see how accurate we were from the plane, and a couple of other things. But I got to fly for the better part of 2 years or 2 falls with Aaron doing that, and that was kind of my introduction into the plane stuff. But I was initially hired on.
It's in the teens that morning, and maybe you're chasing ducks or geese. But now it's September and it's 85 degrees and you're hunting early teal or geese. As a waterfowler, you need dependable weather protection that will not break the bank. Founded in 1996, Frog Togs is not only the leader in breathable waders technology, but a company you can depend on to keep you warm and dry, head to toe, no matter your hunting environment. Stay bone dry by using discount code ZD315 for 15% off not only your first purchase, like most discount codes, but how about every single purchase you make from now until December 31st, 2024?
Kind of to study diving ducks during the spring here.
I gotcha. Yeah. No, a little passing of the torch there.
Yeah. No. I imagine whenever that opportunity became available to you, I mean, you just you laid in bed after the first flight and just kind of went, "Wow, man, this is everything I've ever dreamed of doing." I mean, I would imagine.
There's a little bit of that, but there's also a little bit of what did I get myself into?
Fair enough.
It's it's a long day. You're pretty spent at the end of the day, and it's also a huge commitment, right? So we're in the plane about 32 weeks out of the year, once a week for 32 weeks out of the year. So there's a lot of things that I can't schedule because I never know when I'm going to be in the plane. So it kind of forces you to become better at balancing work and life. And that's something that I struggle with to this day, but it forces you to make those hard decisions a little quicker,
Sure.
But I am super fortunate. I don't want it to sound like I hate it because I love every second of it. But it's a pretty tall task on some days.
Well, sure. Well, that it just speaks to your character and your drive and everything else. I mean, really, that what it takes to do this day in, day out. You are sacrificing a little bit of your, if the weather's not right this day, we got to call it off. And I'm sorry, honey, we can't go to dinner tomorrow because the weather's going to be good. Whatever. I mean,
Right.
so it does speak to the sacrifice it does take to do a good job. And I think with anything that you do in life, really, I mean, if you're going to be good and successful at it, there's a little bit of give and take when it comes to that kind of stuff for sure.
Yeah.
Let me ask you this. So everybody on the planet, at least in the Mississippi and the Central Flyway, keeps saying increase the pintail limit, increase the pintail limit. And I know that there's a change coming up on that, but like, what's your observation? Because like where we hunt at, no lie, we see in this specific area, I mean, I don't even know how many pintails. A lot. Oh, I mean, a metric ton.
Thousands and
thousands.
It's probably, I mean, at least 75% of the birds we see over the last 3 years hunting this area are pintails.
Now, come January in this specific area of Northeast Arkansas, that's just what it is. And I've heard other people talk about that and that. What's that? There's a very historic valley, I think it's called, in Indiana. I can't think of it. It's always been a very good waterfowl region. I can't think of it right now, but they talked about having high numbers of pintails, and what's your observation been? Have you seen it go up and down, or do you guys even get the opportunity to really make marks on pintails with the areas that you observe?
Yeah, so I think, we have been seeing more pintails on our survey, but that's not necessarily because the population is just booming. I think if you look at the breeding population survey that comes out every summer, you'll know that it's in fact not booming. Pintails are kind of taking the hardest hit of any of our dabblers, and it's all because they're short grass prairie specialists, and they're just kind of taking a beating up there. And we're not really helping them out down, mid-migration and southern areas either with the habitat we're providing. But we have been counting more on our surveys, I would say at least the past 3 years. But I think that's a larger indication of the habitat here. So our river, the Illinois River, is super flashy. And so it hasn't been until the last 4 years that we've had really, really good habitat here in a very long time. And it's because the river's so flashy, it gets up, and we'll have, farmers will have a good crop in, we'll have some good moist soil management going on these places, and then boom, we get a early growing season or late growing season flood, and it just wipes out everything. Or we get a late spring flood, and nothing ever really gets a good chance to take hold, and the farmers can't get in and plant, some of the refuges that actually do hold crops. So I have been seeing more, but I think it's more of an indicator of the habitat along the Illinois River. The numbers at the Central Miss, so down at the confluence is where we count most of our pintails down there. Those numbers have been going up too, but the habitat management down there also has just been phenomenal the last 3-4 years, and that's good to see. I mean, that's a good thing to have happening. But it's a dangerous thing to start saying that, we must be having all these birds because we're just seeing them, seeing them in our neck of the woods.
Right.
That's not something that I want to do.
Well,
and the Fish and Wildlife Service sets the federal framework for harvest management of these species, and sounds like they're gonna open it back up a little bit wider, and the individual states will have opportunities to expand those bag limits.
Yeah. Well, and I'll tell you, while I say this, folks, about the numbers that we see, I'm talking about from one specific field. You
Right,
go
exactly.
you
Right.
go over the same area. You go over to another field that's a half mile away. You're not going to see it. I mean, you just
Yeah.
won't. You just won't, and you're only a half mile away from tens of. I mean, if not, I don't know. It's a lot. It's a lot of birds. I'll leave it at that.
Yeah.
But, what is you like when you guys are flying through the air and you guys are looking down at the birds? Is there one that that's easier to identify? That you look at it and you're like, oh yeah, those are canvasbacks, or oh, those are mallards. I mean, obviously snow geese, right? but
Yeah.
is there one that catches your eye quicker when you guys are looking down trying to identify birds?
Not really. So I've gotten so used to the birds kind of it's kind of like that. If you've been hunting for a long time, you're probably pretty good at identifying birds on the wing, right? Because you
Right.
get used to those silhouettes, those wing beat patterns. And so the same phenomena occurs for us just from the sky. So if you're looking down at a big flock of birds, you kind of start getting used to how pintails distribute themselves like super even. Speckle bellies do the same thing. Like it looks like there's a mother hen pintail walking around with a ruler and just making sure that everybody is within 12 inches or whatever. And so you get used to those little characteristics like that. So I don't notice one more than the other. I will say in the early flights, it's really hard to pick out. Sometimes it's really hard to pick out shovelers from mallards because everything is still drab. We're talking about the September teal flights that we do. We'll start picking up some shovelers and some mallards on the last flight of that. And then we start mid to late October is when we start these things. And so birds are still kind of brown when they're coming through here then.
Sure.
And so that can be problematic. But the birds have like kind of distinguishing characteristics. They have them in the air too. So if we're coming up on a big group of birds and it looks like flashlights, a whole bunch of flashlights are pointed at us, and that's probably pintails because that white flash of their breast is showing. Aaron used to call gadwalls and canvasbacks silverbacks because you can fly over them and you can just see that bright kind of silver pop. Teal just do weird things. They're tiny, so you can pick them out. I can pick out a pocket of ringnecks from a half a mile away. I mean, they move super uniform and kind of do their own thing. So every individual species kind of has their own little idiosyncrasies, I guess.
No, that's cool because I mean, now, hearing you talk about it is so cool to hear it from your perspective. I mean, we're trying to always see it from a duck hunter's perspective, but what do you see like from the air? I saw somebody had posted a video of a drone of an ice hole that was open, and these ducks were doing it themselves, and it just showed it was way up, and how muddy that water was in that ice hole, and it just made me think as a duck hunter. I'm like, well, God, if our water's not muddy right now, then, I mean, that's got to be such a I mean, I guess nobody can say whether a duck looks at that and says, hey, that's where I want to be, or if it's the ducks that they see, that's where they want to be, or whatever reason it is. But, it's one of those things where it's just another cool observation from a different view, really.
Sure. Yep.
So, all right. So what, we don't want to keep it too long because we've already run a little bit behind, but
no, I've got time.
But what has been, if you could think of like one of the coolest things that you've seen since you've been doing your job, that's been exciting. It's been one of those moments where you're talking to the pilot going, holy cow, or have you had any of those moments, anything that comes to mind?
I mean, it's all pretty cool, honestly. So the snow goose thing that I told you guys about was definitely one of those. Once we got out of there, it was fun.
Do you want coffee that doesn't suck? Get the duck. Dirty Duck coffee is made specifically for the waterfowl enthusiast. Enjoy flavors like Morning Wood, Dark Dynasty, Cinnamon Teal Snickerdoodle, and First Flight to unlock the flavor that you'll enjoy in the blind for years to come. Our friends at Dirty Duck Coffee Company are now offering all Zero Duck 30 followers a 15% discount when you use code ZeroDuck15 on your next order.
Fun to just fly for a few minutes and make sure I wasn't going to get sick and and talk about it. We had, it's just the little things, right? So, my favorite part of, and this is going to sound like a cop out, but it's really not, because there's one of those situations that happens every year that I look at Mike and I go, man, that's super cool. Like, how did we get this lucky? But my favorite part about doing the survey is just kind of getting a front row seat to the migration as it happens, and I feel like Dr. Heath Hagee, who was the director here when we kind of started putting it out on social media, that was kind of his brainchild, was to start posting the numbers and stuff. And I think he realized the importance of putting that out there so the public could see what we were seeing,
Sure.
And so I get to see that every week. I get to fly over, 40 some refuges and count ducks, and just kind of see the progress of the migration as it's happening week by week. And so that's probably my favorite part. And so it's cool, I'll see, we start early September with the teal flights, and it's like, oh, cool, greenies are showing up, or, oh, cool, there's pintails here now. And a couple of weeks later, oh, cool, there's some widgeon, and then it just kind of, I guess, dominoes from there to where I'm waiting on the divers on pool 19, where are the canvasbacks? Where are the scaup? Where are our mallards? Are the mallards ever going to get here?
Yeah. No, that's go ahead. Sorry.
No, go ahead. You're good.
No, I was just saying, I was just curious. That's a great answer. Honestly. I mean, that to me, if I was in your job, I mean, that's to me, it's like chasing last year or the years before, what did that look like, and how's it going to be different this year? And oh my gosh, last 5 years in a row at this pool, we had these ducks always, and now they're not here. Where did they go?
Right.
Or something like that. So no, but
we flew over a refuge at, the Ted Shanks refuge down at the confluence. I think it was the 2nd of January, and the week before had been holding something like 50,000 ducks. Their duck season goes until the end of December, and so by the time we got back down there to survey again, and on that January 2nd survey, there was next to nothing. And so that was one of those cases where it's like, Mike, where did they go? They should still be here. I mean, sure, we probably shouldn't have quite as many, but they should still be here.
Right.
So we run into that. I mean, it's almost a weekly discussion that we have where we're like, okay, where did these birds go? And chances are it's somewhere else on that same refuge. They've just fed out that specific spot, or they're following the water line as the refuge manager is bringing up water or whatever.
Sure.
So it's pretty cool to see. That's another piece, is to see really good management and see it pay off. These refuge managers and Illinois and Missouri and Iowa, they put a lot of work into this, and it's cool to see it pay off with big numbers of ducks.
That's awesome. That's awesome.
Yeah, I bet, because as you probably know, the refuge managers and the WMA managers, they're always under a bunch of heat. You know, everybody always thinks, one, they are out to not let you kill ducks.
Yep.
And two,
they don't do a good job.
Right. Like, and it's always the opposite of
it's
that.
it's always coaching from the sidelines.
Yeah.
When it comes, but there is that other flip side where us that take the time to educate ourselves. And honestly, we've tried to make a strong passion of that. Tristan and I, honestly, with this podcast, is the public officials, like anybody that is doing this. If you're a waterfowl biologist, if you're involved in any STEM of waterfowl, and this is your job, you're doing this because you love it. You know what I mean? And so y'all's job is so important to us. Let me ask you, Josh, tell everybody where they can follow you guys and follow, because it's like crack to me. I mean, it is. I'm always like, dude, I'll call Tristan back. Dude, Forbes posted this, you know what I mean? Or whatever. So where can everybody follow y'all at?
Sure. So we have Facebook accounts and Instagram account. I'm the oldest person at the lab, and yet I am in charge of these somehow. I'm not sure how that worked, but so if you have a problem with anything that's posted, I'm probably at fault for it. But yeah, so if you just look for Forbes Biological Station on either of those platforms, we're there. We try to post updates on some of the ongoing research, like the disturbance. So we're doing a disturbance project similar to what Dr. Cohen and some folks did down in Tennessee, what Doug Osborn did down in Arkansas.
Yep.
We've got that going. We actually just wrapped up our last field season of that work. We're about to start diving duck banding here probably in another month. And so I'm sure that's pretty much our favorite thing to do here at the station is the diving duck banding.
That's really cool.
And I don't want to interrupt real quick, but
no,
and don't let me open up a can of worms here. But if I'm listening to this podcast, I'm like, dude, I would love. Do you need volunteers to help out with that kind of stuff? Or do you?
Yeah, I mean, we're open to volunteers. It's kind of it's not a guaranteed thing,
Yep.
It's a lot like hunting. Some days they're there and some days they aren't.
Yep.
But we do allow volunteers, assuming this avian influenza thing don't hit us too hard.
Sure.
We're open to volunteers. And so we do that banding on both the Mississippi River, so over on Pool 19, and here in the Illinois River Valley.
Nice.
And so that you'll probably start seeing posts about that soon. And then I don't do as good of a job in the summer as I should of updating some of the things that we do in the summer. But we do. I think it's important to mention all that because the aerial survey, while cool, and it's probably the most visible thing that we do, it's only a small part. It's a big part of my day, but it's only a small part of what the lab actually does.
Makes sense. Sure. Well, and if y'all want to learn more about that, definitely look them up. If you're just hearing about this for the first time, it's going to be like crack for you, because I mean, it's just one of those things. Thank you to you, Josh, everybody over there at Forbes Bio. I want to thank you, Illinois DNR. I mean, that's a huge commitment, and all the other funding that comes into what you guys do. And man, we can't thank you enough for taking the time to be on here tonight with us.
Yeah, you bet. And so for those that aren't aware, I know if I can throw this out there.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't post, I post like a little summary of the survey each week, but I don't post the numbers. And part of that is just because it just doesn't make sense to do it because we're already posting it to the website. And so if people, and I know some people weren't aware of that. I'm not sure how that's possible. But so folks that are aware of the social media kind of presence, but not aware that the breakdown of the numbers by refuge are posted on our website. So there's
Very
usually
cool.
a link posted, or you can go to our bio and click on the link, and there'll be a week by week update of the refuges that we survey.
All right. So to make it clear, you can't call Josh and be like, look, I'll take you to a good steak dinner if you can help me out, bro.
I can't tell you.
He works for the state that can't accept
it. You can't hunt where I survey. So.
Yeah.
I guess you can hunt as much as you can afford on the areas.
Yeah.
Yes, sir. That's the truth. That's the truth. That's the truth, man. Well, thank you so much, man. Tristan.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I enjoyed it.
Oh, we had a blast, Josh. Thank you again for coming on.
Yep. Are you guys still hunting down there? You guys getting back over to Arkansas?
I think we're pretty much packing it in for the season up until the veteran hunt in Arkansas because my dad was Navy. So I'll go out there and film, and then I think what we're gonna do is like snow goose hunt 2 days leading up to it. Do the veterans duck hunt and then head home. So
cool.
Yep. Well, good deal. And just to wrap this up, if y'all haven't checked it out yet, make sure you jump on YouTube and check out our One Hell of a Duck season, where we've put out 4 episodes so far this season. 3. And we've got another one coming up real quick, and I'm not going to tell you.
It was a snowy, beautiful cinematic.
It was epic.
Beat down. It was cool.
It was epic. It was the most epic. I mean, when you, all I could think about was when I was a kid in Illinois, and I'd pray for it to be a Christmas with snow. This is the only thing that matches that. It was something special. I'll tell you that, man. It was neat. So we can't wait to bring you guys that. It's going to be a great thing. Thank you, Delta Thunder Outfitters, and man, again, Josh, thank you so much.
Yep, thanks for having me. I enjoyed it.
All right, have a good night.
Thank you, Josh. We'll be sure to tag you guys when we post it.
Yep, sounds good.
All right.
Bye-bye.
Bye, fellas.
I've been southbound, I've been hellbound, riding on the midnight train. Going too fast now, think I'll slow down, standing in the pouring rain.